sure everyone's still finishing off lunch and stuff like that, so we'll give them a chance. We'll ease into this a little bit, but I think we've got a lot to cover, as everyone's seen. This is making the move to Multiscreen 2.0. Oh, I thought someone said no. 1.0 is down there and to the left. So everyone's read the description what the panel's about, but being that it is so broad and we have a lot that we could potentially cover in here, I want to kind of narrow it down a little bit. The essence of this is we're looking at, talking about the opportunities and the challenges that are presented from scaling true, meaningful, multi-screen solutions. We've got a great panel that represents content owners, service providers that really represent both sides of the value chain that I think will bring a lot of perspective and insight that I think we'll all learn a lot from. I'm certainly looking forward to learning a lot from them as well. Real quick, I'm J.R. Cottingham. I work for Clearleap, responsible for market development. For those of you who don't know who Clearleap is, briefly, Clearleap is a company. We work with most of the big names in the media industry, helping them deploy their content assets and taking their brands to the multi-screen environment. We do a lot of the heavy lifting behind the scenes from our cloud-based platform. So it's content and asset management, metadata management, and then all the way up down to the device level, so subscriber management, catalog management, and device enablement. So you can see as me moderating this panel, I'm in a pretty good position here to take advantage of the topic, and I'm definitely going to be taking some notes here with the folks we have. So the themes I'm going to nail down onto with what we're trying to cover today are three. First is business model. I want to try to suss out what we're seeing with regards to multiscreen as it's hitting scale. What changes or shifts are we seeing that are taking place around the business model? And are they done, or are we going to continue to see them for how much longer? I have a feeling that they're going to change for quite some time. The next is capabilities. And capabilities I'm looking at from an operational perspective, from a technology perspective, and even from a business perspective. Multiscreen is forcing business organizations, people in our industry and the industries that we're working with, to change their business practices and how they operate to address and meet the needs of multiscreen. I want to try to bring out what some of the key nuggets are in that space. And then the last thing I want to bring out is priorities. Multiscreen is changing how we think about what's important, what screen's important, what content is important, how you prioritize all those against one another is also, I think, an important point to bring out of this. So those are the three nuggets I'm going to try to hit. The format of the panel will be, and before I get to the introductions, which we will, I promise, the format will be essentially, I'll ask specific questions. I may ask general questions, but I definitely want a lot of dialogue here between the panelists. I know they have a lot to say. I know they have a lot of opinions on this matter, so the purpose of this is really to kind of bring the expertise out of them. We get about 15 to 20 minutes before we get to the end of the panel. I'll open it up to questions from the audience. And I think that's it. So with that, why don't we go ahead and start with the introductions. Tell us who you are and what your responsibilities involve.
Okay. I'm Tricia Lynch, and I'm at Verizon. I do program acquisition, and so I do that for Fios TV, for Verizon Wireless, and our OTT service Redbox Instant by Verizon.
Hi everybody, my name is Richard Shirley. I work at A&E Networks. I'm a member of A&E's distribution department, where I participate on a business development team. My primary responsibilities revolve around product development and operations for all of the new media platforms we have in place with our MVPD partners, TV Everywhere, Video on Demand. I also spend a lot of time working with the teams that are responsible for the affiliation agreements with our distribution partners. So it gives me a little bit of insight as to how TV Everywhere and multi-platform is an increasingly important component of our relationship with those distribution partners, and also why I was excited to join the panel and hopefully lend some insight on both sides of the equation.
Hi everybody, my name is Gabe Sauerhoff. I'm the Vice President of Digital Media Distribution and Discovery Communications. My role is to really focus on establishing next generation distribution partnerships with a whole host of different customer sets, MVPDs, over-the-top players, websites, different international platforms as well. So really focused on establishing these new business relationships and then managing the relationships from there.
Hi, I'm David Letter, VP Technology and In-Demand. My primary responsibility is to be sure that In-Demand kind of keeps up with what's going on in the industry and make sure that we can support all the content providers and all the operators and make sure that we keep everything going and make sure that all the content gets to where it has to go and that we're always looking ahead.
Great. Okay. So we're going to begin. I'm going to start with Gabe and panelists to follow.
What did I do to deserve the first question?
I want to start this thinking about Netflix. I think everyone's familiar with the recent success, and in many respects maybe not so recent success that Netflix has had with shows such as House of Cards and Orange is the New Black. What I'm interested in hearing Gabe and the panelists talk a little bit about is what are their thoughts on what does that portend for where the industry is headed as a whole in the behaviors that we're seeing from the consumers and the model that Netflix is using and so on.
Sure. Well, I think clearly that's a topic of great interest and one that continues to permeate the headlines and really be of interest to the industry. I think that what we're seeing, my personal take on it is really, that they have identified the need to acquire content to differentiate themselves, and they're doing that in a manner that sort of positions them a little bit more really as kind of a network in a lot of ways, sort of a curated group of offerings. They've chosen to, with their original content strategy, to focus on television, obviously. And that those shows obviously help them differentiate themselves and really gives consumers a reason to subscribe and to keep coming back. I think, there's always sort of this question with digital media platforms are whether it's Netflix or Hulu or really any service provider in this new media world are they kind of a distributor or are they a kind of a curated programmed offering? And I think whereas as a consumer, from my perspective, whereas Netflix several years ago really started as more of a more as a distributor, offering lots of different movies and kind of lots of different television programs. They've kind of evolved their offering a little bit to be more curated. I think, that's my observation as a consumer from a industry perspective. I just think it comes back to reinforcing in a fragmented, very busy marketplace for consumers where, attention is really diverted in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of competition. That content, continues to resonate, and that quality content continues to be worth investing in, and that's certainly something that at Discovery we believe in steadfastly and continue to do ourselves with a tremendous amount of original production as well. So that's my take on it.
Nice. So, go ahead.
Sure. As a fellow content provider in the market, I'll tell you, there isn't another company that we don't do business with and spend so much time talking about internally. We tend to have some schizophrenic viewpoints, and I'll be honest about it, some schizophrenic viewpoints within the company as to where our relationship should be with Netflix. And it's really a challenging question. On the one hand, you wonder why Netflix, as a company that started out by not having its own content, and not having its own pipes, you try and figure out where they get their competitive advantage from. And it speaks to the fact that they've done a brilliant job curating the content, as Gabe mentioned, making it easily accessible across a variety of platforms and devices and helping viewers navigate through the offerings and find selections that they want. We currently are not providing any content to Netflix. We're certainly open to it and looking at Netflix as yet another way to extract value from syndicating our content. But the point that you mentioned about Netflix now going out and creating its own content, you wonder why, or wonder whether, is that activity ultimately subsidizing the activities of a competitor in the market? So that's why it's created a lot of challenges, for us to figure out exactly where we need to take the relationship and, what to do in terms of next steps.
Okay. So it sounds like it's sustainable. This is not something that is...
Yeah, I think Netflix started out as kind of the killer app that would bring someone else's content to every subscriber that wanted it. I think over time they've realized that many more applications and many more appliances are out there that can now do the same function. So it becomes just a commodity, being an app or being a conduit or being the pipe to get that content there. So I think what they're trying to do is kind of take that next step and differentiate themselves and be that content creator and be that brand that's not just, oh, they're an application on a bunch of devices that I can watch content on.
Right.
So
I think they've done an amazing job. I have greatest admiration for them. And one of the most important things they've done is show to us who getting a little bit lazy that the importance of multi-screen is huge and access points. I think that their starting point, like many new channels in the space, library films, and then library TV shows, and then original programming. So it's a trajectory we've seen with Bravo or any number of basic and premium channels. But they're two critical, important contributions or things that we continue to watch and are challenged by is they made huge strides in search. One of them was inspired by, they actually were library films. So how to make this service look the best to everyone looking at it, to look different to you than it does to me, to make me think, oh yeah, that 1980s Disney movie was awesome. I need to watch that. Brilliant. Secondly, the fact that they made it really easy to access on all kinds of platforms. And what that has inspired in us is the need to deliver our own services on lots of different platforms. And I think we've tripped a little bit for a couple reasons, but I think that's their great place in the market is a challenger to us.
True. Okay. And I think, well, as we get into this a little bit, I think we'd love to talk about some of those challenges that you say folks are tripping over right now, because I certainly agree with you. I can certainly see it as well. But Gabe, you'd mentioned something just briefly, talking about emphasizing the quality of the content. And knowing obviously, at A&E that's extremely important as well. And coming from the traditional side of the industry space, oftentimes live is associated or equated with some of the the most premium forms of content that are out there. And with what we're seeing with Netflix and the success that they've had with the non-live, the on-demand programming, the scripted programming that's not live, does this start influencing the dialogue that we see around the value of live, and is multi-screen only going to amp that up?
Well, I think it certainly influences the dialogue. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, we see live continue to aggregate the biggest number of eyeballs and to continue to sort of be the dominant form of of consumption. I think that and that I don't foresee for our content is going to change anytime soon. But that being said, clearly I think one of the things about this wonderful world of the internet, right, and interactive technologies, is that it creates multiple options, not just in the media space, right, but for multiple ways to connect, right? There used to be just the telephone, and now there's Facebook, and there's Twitter, and there's all these different choices across a lot of different industries. You can look at that type of transition and how the internet opens up in different modes and methods of connecting or watching media or whatever the case may be, whatever industry you're talking about. And I think that I think it's doing that in this world of multi-platform media consumption as well. And so it's creating new opportunities for on-demand. It's creating new opportunities for short-form content, frankly, in a lot of ways as well. So live is going to continue to be a focus. I think live continues to play a very substantial, resonant role in the world of multi-platform digital video. And I think in some ways, live can really thrive as a way to aggregate and create, we've all heard the analogy of creating sort of water cooler moments, and so I think that live continues to do those things in this new world, but we're going to see ways in which on-demand can complement that, hopefully, and that is certainly our goal, and we've seen evidence thus far to support that thesis that on-demand can introduce people to new shows and can sort of really complement that live viewing experience as well. So, and then clearly sometimes there are just live events that are going to only be live, right? And that's not going to change, whether it's sports, clearly is sort of the most typical use case, but also Discovery with some of our live events that we did, like Skywire Live, where Nick Wallenda walked across the Grand Canyon, right? That is a moment that was sort of very dominant and meaningful in terms of the live consumption that we saw, and we used digital video to really complement that consumption.
Okay. David, I want to switch gears a little bit. So we talk about multi-screen, inevitably we start thinking about complexities. And one of the first areas we all go when we think about complexities is on the technology side of things. And being as someone in demand, you're intimately familiar with those challenges on the technology side. Lesser known, but probably equally challenging, are kind of on the business side is the licensing of multi-screen. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your perspective on that and share some insights as to what those complexities really are and what it means.
Yeah, well, I mean, we do a lot of licensing for a lot of the content providers, but I think the challenge has been that as we started out with multi-screen, you had each of the providers who had maybe a different idea of how they wanted things to play out, and then the technology was difficult. So I think part of the problem is you've got these current offerings with different MSOs that kind of have maybe a different set of channels or a different set of content and things like that. So I think when we get to licensing, I think we need to kind of simplify things. I think we need to make it so that you don't have to worry about what you want to watch, where you can watch it, on what device you want to watch it. That should just be easy. It should be a no-brainer. The technology we can solve after that, but I think the licensing deals have to be simplified across the board, level the playing field, so that we're not worried about, well, we can watch these channels here, but we can't watch them there, and things like that. I think that will make the experience across the board much more consumer-friendly, and I think they will then start to use that second screen as their primary screen. They may be watching live events on their iPad. We're not worried about what channel it's on or where it is because I know I can get it. They may be watching the primary screen, the live event, and the secondary screen is supplementary information. Yeah. But the two of them will kind of come together, and they won't worry about what can I get here, what can I get there. I just know I can get it where I want it.
So the fragmentation that we all hear about, and it's certainly referenced in the description of what we're going to cover in this panel, is sometimes a term that has a negative connotation to it, but we're maybe starting to hit a tipping point now where we're starting to think that that fragmentation now actually may be turning into opportunity. Is that so? We're maybe hitting a tipping point. Are we maybe seeing that? Or are we not quite there yet, or is that still a big challenge to overcome?
I think, there in the notes here, we have the question, are we taking multi-screen from 1.0 to 2.0? I actually think we're at 0.5 right now due to the fragmentation issue. So I still think we're facing a market that's chock full of challenges. I don't mean to be the downer guy on the panel, but part of the problem is, whether it relates to rights, whether it relates to relationships between program providers and their distribution partners. Not every programmer has all of their TV Everywhere deals done with every distributor. Mm-hmm. Not every distributor has all of their TV Everywhere deals done with every programmer. So there's a lack of parity, there's a lack of congruity in customer experience. So if you come to an A&E site and app, could be for the A&E network, History, Lifetime, you're going to see a drop-down menu of all the providers that are authenticating their subscribers on our sites and app to get access to a richer menu of content. Well, there's a good chance that you're not necessarily going to find your paid TV provider in that menu. So as a consumer, you're sort of left with a frustrating, less than optimal experience. And I'm sure distributors are faced with the same challenges as they present TV Everywhere viewing opportunities on their own properties. Yeah. So until we kind of create a universal availability. 10 years ago, when we just had a linear feeds to worry about, the experience was complete and whole and the same everywhere. Now it's not. It depends on which partner you're talking about. It depends on which series you're talking about, if it's a rights issue. So dealing with that fragmentation, I think, is going to be key to making TV everywhere more successful, and ultimately being able to compete with some of the over-the-top plays that are coming into the market.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sitting right in the middle of all this complexity because I've got to convince these two guys and 20 other people like them that I don't want to pay more for the same programming. I just want to put it somewhere else. And then I've got you guys, my vendors, and my own operations people saying, just get us everything. We'll just put it everywhere. And so, but there's a we're kind of in year 3 or 4 of a 10-year plan, and my goal is everything everywhere. But I've got to convince all these guys to do it, at the same time. And they're running their own businesses. They've got to decide: are we going to be on the forefront of this one? Are we going to follow and watch how it goes and see if it doesn't damage our business? So. Getting everybody rallied together is obviously my challenge and why I have a job. But the tricky thing, I think, is that the customer expectation is to see everything, and so the tolerance of that is low. The tolerance that A&E's on one thing, but I don't see Discovery, or Fox is not participating in that, So it's difficult then. What makes it difficult is our marketing people then are trying to sell the concept of TV everywhere. We've got everything, and then when you really look at it, it's not really everything. So it's unfortunate that we can't all make the same decision at once, but obviously that wouldn't be competitive.
Some strides were made, or we saw something last week or so. They talked about 21% of subscribers had actually authenticated and used TV everywhere within a period of a month. Over the past month. Yeah. It's a positive step. There's a lot more that needs to happen there, but it sounds like is the challenge more about educating the consumer that that's available, and obviously doing something like that with on the back end dealing with the challenge that you're dealing with. Are we going to see a substantial increase in that 21% to 40% anytime soon, or is that just going to kind of creep slowly for a little while?
Well, I think we have things that we should do as operators, and Verizon specifically, but one, we've had moments which push us higher, and some of them have been thanks to the time, money, and effort that HBO put into marketing HBO Go, the time, money, and effort that NBC put into the multi-screen access of the Olympics. So there are, and because that really speaks to the customer and the fan of those particular things. And when you get it in, when you're speaking to their heart, so to speak, rather than their head, that is a real service, I think, that the channels could do for the whole effort is telling their own customers about it. We, on the other hand, the operators and just Verizon specifically, we've had, I think we're on 3.0 just because I feel like I've
so the average is getting closer to 2.0. That's like a 1.75, I think.
But we've taken several different approaches, kind of overlapping approaches to multi-screen. We introduced FlexView, which was our transactional movie and sale and rental service on multiple screens. Then we said, okay, now we've got TV everywhere. And then just, last year we said, okay, it's Fios mobility. So, but what's the difference? The difference is that we've called it something different. It's just either live stuff or on-demand stuff on different platforms. And so we probably, from the consumer standpoint, we should not have pointed out all these differences. We should have just said, we're bringing you Fios wherever it is, and kept the kind of different product approaches we took to things and the different rights issues that we had. We should have been more, kept that to ourselves and presented a FiOS everywhere thing and concept.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think versioning-wise, we're at least headed in the right direction. We're going up. I think if you look at the experience you get on that second screen, I think, you know, as we had mentioned, as you get closer to the same type of experience you get on your set-top box, that's when you'll get those numbers to go up. When people can pick up whatever device they've got, whether it's a tablet or a phone, and feel like they can do the same thing they could do on their set-top box, and not worry about what they're going to get or what their limitations are, I think that's when you start to see that really go up, because you'll start to capture audiences that would not sit in front of the TV.
Yeah.
You know, you'll capture the younger audience that may be on the go or somewhere else in the house with a different device. If they know that they can do the same thing the parents can do on the TV, they'll probably do it.
Yeah, and I would add, I think that you know, one of the factors that has made getting to multi-platform 2.0 or 3.0 or what, wherever the consensus is for the group is measurement and the lack of measurement on some of these platforms, and it's been a topic that's sort of been discussed and really dissected in quite a bit of depth on panels like this. But I think that we're getting closer to that day where sort of all these various devices have measurement. I think that will be incredibly helpful in terms of unlocking content. And I also think that we have to keep in mind that there are a number of new skill sets for, certainly I think both for operators and programmers in this new world. Like Richard said earlier about 10 years ago there was just the linear feed and it was the same linear feed basically to everyone. Now there's this proliferation of devices, all of which need or not all of which, but many of which have different development standards and sort of that's a new business and a new skill set, quite honestly, for programmers and operators alike. And there's not really a kind of ubiquitous sense of, okay, well, what platforms do we want to all develop on first, and what platforms, what devices are okay to go to versus aren't okay to go to. And so, all that to say that I think as measurement comes along, that will simplify, and as sort of all of us in the collective industry gain more experience with the development process and developing really, really great experiences, we're going to continue to see that fragmentation really turn into something more cohesive and unified.
So sticking with the theme of simplification, next question to Richard and to Gabe, both of you. End of last year, an announcement came across the wires where Comedy Central had announced that they had merged their digital and linear operations. And we're starting to see that happening in other areas as well. We're starting to see some of it at Scripps. It's demonstrating within the media and the content sides of the organization that they're noticing the efficiencies that one gets from the ability to monetize a scaled solution across multiscreen, and also needing to bring together some of the resources to put them all together against it. Are either of you, are those trends you're seeing as well? Are those things that you agree with? Is that also something that is just, is it portending something bigger that we're seeing also?
Talk about fragmentation.
Yeah, right.
So this is an organizational question, basically. Well, no, I think like any company in the same market, we're constantly rethinking our strategy on how we organize internally around opportunities such as this. I can tell you on the production side of our business, we've actually aligned all of the production-related groups, whether it's content production or I should say broadcast engineering, production services, as well as our IT groups. They now report into the same person, and that's helped enormously in terms of making sure that we have the appropriate resources available to encode and fulfill content to meet the obligations of our affiliation agreements. On the sales side of the business, I think we're still going through a couple of growing pains. I can share with you, by way of example, a lot of the pure digital relationships that we have in the market are headed up out of our digital media department, whereas our distribution group kind of focuses on the more traditional MVPD landscape. But obviously, given the pressures of figuring out the right TV everywhere strategy, we're constantly working together and making sure that we're lockstep in terms of aligning around those opportunities. But I'll acknowledge that you have to be nimble, and organization is certainly key in developing a competitive advantage. I think we're headed in the right direction. I'm curious to hear what Gabe has to say about it. We've talked about this personally.
I don't know that there's one way to get there organizationally. I don't think that there's any necessarily any right or wrong organizational structure. I think it depends on the culture of the company and a lot of different factors that make every situation unique and sort of its own set of circumstances. I think what's really important is that as Richard alluded to, that there's a technological underpinning that will and technology platform underneath those organizations, whatever they may be, that really can execute on delivering the brand vision of the network or the show in question. And I think as long as you kind of have that organizational commitment to really diving into this space, and you have a solid technology underpinning, then that allows the content to really shine and the brand really to shine, and that ultimately is what we're focused on at Discovery is sort of continuing to reinforce those brands and create the best content, and then hopefully the platform will deliver it efficiently and in a manner that our audiences enjoy.
I think you guys, in demand, clearly with Ubiquity, you may be in a bit of the catbird seat because, to your point earlier about live, do we all need to be delivering? Do I, as an operator, need to deliver 300 plus channels broadcast to the set-top box at all times? Probably not. If I have, which I do, a very robust VOD library, couldn't I just present a schedule of on-demand assets rather than a linear channel? I think that there's a kind of infrastructure evolution that we'll start to see. And you guys will be in a good position.
I mean, as the person who deals with that type of technology, we see the same thing. You've got these different business units that kind of existed on their own, and then you realize there's a lot of overlap with some of the processes and the technologies that they use. So it makes a whole lot of sense to start combining some of those, so you get very good efficiency at kind of bringing stuff in once in one particular format and making sure that through a single process it's available for every screen or every place it needs to go. So we're doing that. We're kind of starting to combine a lot of our separate processes into one, and gaining efficiency by processing stuff in such a manner that we're expecting it to go to more than one place.
So a little bit in theme with this, but something, Tricia, you referenced a little bit earlier, simplifying the user experience. One of the things you talked about was you wish you had gone out there and simply said, it's this. Is that starting to happen? I mean, is that more just looking back on it kind of forensically going, gosh, I really wish we would have done that? Or is it happening? And
it is. Our last iteration, our Fios Mobile, is hopefully our going forward. And it's based on learning we've done in a couple of different versions of Multiscreen. It should combine our TV Everywhere rights, our transactional, what we used to call FlexView rights, and our live. It does include live in and out of home, so that the customer doesn't have to think about what concept am I in. It's just Fios on different things other than their main set-top box TV. So, so yes, fingers crossed. We've learned from our mistakes and are going forward phase.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and David, that obviously dramatically simplifies, to your point, if you're doing that internally within your technical processes itself, but then if your primary interface to the service providers is also doing that simplification, I think that's something that benefits the direction you're pushing in demand as well.
Yes. I mean, there's the definition of TV Everywhere, which is kind of all over the place, and we need to consolidate and make sure that when you say that, everybody thinks the same thing. And then, the experience, it should be similar across the board, too. So I think if we get those things together, then it will mean the same thing to everyone. and it will make everybody's life much easier, and we'll see this take
So
off.
you hit on one of the really big challenges, I think, from the content provider side, which is giving that consistent experience. I mean, how do you go through the maturations of thinking of creating a consistent user experience across all these devices, or do you not do that? Do you have to kind of bifurcate your understanding of the different devices and program to that?
You know, that's a great question. You can't ignore the medium itself, and I can share with you, for instance, as far as the TV Everywhere content that's available on our websites and in our apps, the rate of authentication, so when viewers actually log in with their pay TV subscriber credentials, the rate of authentication is significantly higher on mobile apps. So when you have your iPad in your lap, and I think the reason for that is because the mobile apps themselves are created for video viewing experiences specifically. So in order to access the video that you're looking for, you're going to take that extra step and look up your credentials and go through the process in order to get the content. Whereas on the websites, based on the brand that you're talking about, the experience on our websites is a little different. A&E, on the one hand, is probably more focused on the shows, where the history.com website, it's a vertical. So we've also got a lot of generic history-related content in addition to the great shows that are available on History of the Network. But you have to take that into consideration when you're designing the user experience, and you can't make that experience the same as it's going to be on the mobile app. We can strive for parity in terms of what the underlying content is, but we have to have very clear expectations or acknowledge the fact that viewers are going to get to that content in sometimes very different ways, if that makes any sense to you guys. Yeah,
absolutely. Same thing with you, Gabe? I mean, it's...
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I agree with everything Richard said. I think just one sort of, corollary, I guess, is that, as more and more devices proliferate and as consumers continue to sort of gravitate to these different devices to consume more and more content, it really does open up opportunities to think about what is content and what sort of experiences can we provide very differently. And Discovery has been, I'd say, focused on sort of opening up that definition, right? So in the past, the definition of content has really been whatever, we're going to take whatever content we put on the television and we're going to take it to these different devices, right? Now, we're creating a lot of what we call digital native content or web original content. An example would be, we have this service called Animal Planet Live, which sort of aggregates real-time live video feeds from around the world of different animals being themselves, right? So from video feeds from zoos or animal conservation societies or various organizations, and that was a service that just wouldn't have been possible 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because there wouldn't have been a place for it. It wouldn't have necessarily been something that made sense as a linear channel per se on a cable lineup, and so I think really. This new world we're in opens up opportunities to expand the brand, right? To expand the Animal Planet brand in some interesting ways, and serve up new content in ways that can help the brand and sort of reinforce it.
Okay. So this one's to the whole panel. Online video and traditional TV, is it a zero-sum game? I mean, you essentially have to have both to really create the truly complete and compelling offering?
No, I don't think so. I was just thinking over the last, 18 months, I've been having a lot of design discussions about our user interface and, what you think is possible and what is possible sometimes doesn't match. But one of the things that I would love to see is the concept of a channel change, that a channel is the broadcast, but it's also the on-demand, the previous episodes, and maybe some of that, what I might call the magazine aspect of what you were describing with the history stuff, and maybe some sponsorship in-depth sponsorship stuff. So the channel lineup would be more of a series of portals that says this is everything about history, not just this is the channel we're showing now. Now, that's all got to be debated out because you've got dependencies on people are making money on that advertising and the eyeballs being there rather than somewhere else. But I think we've seen that there's so much overlap between people holding their cell phones and tablets in their lap and watching TV and, you know, looking things up that is related or not sometimes, but a lot of it is a lot of IMDb stuff going on. So the evolution, I think, can accommodate something that is a little more complex than it is right now.
Okay.
Would you mind restating or asking the question again? I just want to make sure I understand. When you talk about that in a zero-sum game.
Well, the idea being that you really want to have, you really want to have both of them together before you get something that truly reaches the potential that you've intended, or can they exist discreetly?
I think that ubiquity, as a content provider, you want to be on the platform, on the device where your viewer is. And to that degree, I think the answer is yes, you have to have the whole package. And we were talking about Netflix before. I think we've all taken a cue from Netflix's strategy. They did a wonderful job of making sure their app was available on Blu-ray players, on mobile devices. You name it, they were there. A&E is following a very similar strategy now. We've published apps for A&E History and Lifetime, which are available on iOS, Android, Kindle, as well as devices such as Roku, Apple TV, and Xbox. We're about getting our brand in front of the market and where our viewers are as best we can. We've already seen 15 million downloads across all of those platforms for our apps, and we see that number growing very strongly in the coming years. So being where the viewer is has always been and will continue to be a critical part of our strategy.
I think the two can exist separately, but they also complement each other. Sure. The idea being that if you can get your traditional programming to that second screen, kind of duplicate of the primary, you'll catch a whole new audience that you may not have gotten before. But the other thing is it can do things for you that the primary screen will not. For instance, invisible audio cues that will sync your tablet to what's going on the television set, or feeding supplementary content to that for those who want to sit there with the tablet while watching TV. We've looked at all these different possibilities as ways to make the two of them work much better together, as opposed to just IMDb while you're watching a movie, but actually have that automatically come up for you while the movie's on. So.
Okay, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll turn it over to the audience for helping us close this out. So my question is going to end on a topic which I'm sure we've all heard discussed quite a bit, dynamic ad insertion. And particularly, when we hear about multiscreen, I mean, it is a medium tailored for dynamic ad insertion. Is that going to be a significant driver behind the adoption of multiscreen from a business perspective, or are we still a little bit off in terms of the challenges that dynamic advertising presents to us that it can't factor into the value equation for multiscreen?
Well, I guess I'll take a stab at it. I think that dynamic ad insertion is a incredibly attractive notion, right? And one that that is of great interest to to media companies to open up new opportunities to monetize the content and to sort of build ancillary revenue streams that can turn into not so ancillary revenue streams down the road. But we are in very, very early stages of that. Look at video on demand in sort of a very traditional definition of video on demand on the set-top box, right? That is still that platform, video on demand, has been around for many years at this point, and we're still just getting into a place where there's any type of real scalable currency that's able to be monetized on that via that mechanism. So I think that now, keep in mind, that has not stopped the adoption. That the fact that DAI has not existed really in any meaningful way on the set-top box has not meant that video on demand has been a failure per se, right? There's still lots and lots of people going onto set-top boxes and whatnot all over the country watching on demand. I think I would argue that had it been there, that we would maybe even see more adoption because there'd be more content there and whatnot. So I think it's an important factor. I don't think it is necessarily a completely gating one, but it's certainly one that we are steadfastly interested in working with our partners to develop and to apply ourselves where we can.
Yeah, I think from a technology standpoint, as I mentioned, VOD has been around for a while, but dynamic ad insertion on that has been really tough to get going. On these, any other multi-second screen device or mobile device or something, I think the hurdle is a lot lower. It's a lot easier to get that done. Like for the web, ads in front of things on the web is easy to do. I think from a technology standpoint, we can get that done a lot quicker than we did for VOD. Plus, it opens up things that it's not just advertising; it's product tie-ins and shopping and a whole bunch of other things that you wouldn't have even thought about doing, on the set-top or on VOD.
Sure.
So I think it actually opens up a wider range of possibilities that are much easier to accomplish than we had to deal with VOD.
Yeah, the evolution is taking longer than we would hope, but on FiOS, since we have a tremendous amount of VOD, we've seen about maybe, it sort of depends, but maybe 15% of viewership is on VOD. So that's 15% of viewership that's not on linear, that is not being counted on linear. But since we've, and the evolution is C3, so now we've got C3, it's counting, that viewership, which is great. But the complexity of implementing the on-demand, the insertion, is unfortunately on the operator, but the majority of the benefit of ad insertion is actually on the programmer. So we've got, basically, the operator is not as inspired to get it done as the programmer is.
Sure.
And so, but the operator has to be the one to do it. So there's this sort of push-pull of,
Right.
we'll do it, but is it worth it to us? But so we are actually making strides. It's going slower than expected. I think you guys are in line,
right.
But we've got a couple of things happening this year
Right.
that are going to start dynamic ad insertion. But it's having worked at FiOS for 10 years now, I am stunned how long this has taken.
Yes, sure.
But
business challenges exceed the technical challenges in
this
case.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, as the technical challenges might be solved sooner than we think, and I think maybe in the case of FiOS, whether it's set-top DAI, A&E itself is very bullish on DAI. We're partners with Freewheel and Canoe. So we're implementing DAI across multi-platform as well as set-top on demand. So I think the technical challenges are getting resolved rather quickly. My curiosity is whether the appetite in the market will keep up with our ability to solve the technical aspects. And what I mean by that is when you start talking about the science of addressability and targetability, it's a whole new way of doing things that the ad buying and selling components in the market have to learn to understand as well. And the trade-off there is I can spend a lot of time figuring out the addressability and all of the advanced functionality, but am I missing out on an opportunity of scale where I don't do DAI, I do something else, I focus on linear, and I'm reaching millions and millions and millions of more people.
Yes.
And so it becomes a trade-off in terms of resources and what people really have time to wrap their heads around. in
Yeah.
terms of the
Makes
opportunity.
sense. Good. Okay. Well, I think that concludes this part. Any questions from the audience that we have for our panelists? No? No? Go ahead.
I had a question about the programming side. Clearly, the technology is getting to where it's ubiquitous, TV everywhere, transparent. You still have to deal, aside from network programming and paid HBO, paid type programming, specifically with respect to video on demand. Your primary producers are the major studios. You're still dealing within a system that is somewhat archaic with respect to its distribution windows. The playing field has also become a bit more level for the creators in that they can, in effect, act like a studio. They can be the creator. What are the barriers for the individuals to come to the program acquisition people? Because there could be thousands of them. You don't want to deal with all these people necessarily. But it's become easier for them to do it.
Sure.
The old system just doesn't work. It's
Right.
not necessary, you know, if you're a filmmaker, to make your movie, get your theatrical release, wait for it to 2 weeks to go on to video on demand, go to the pay TV. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There can be very many creators that will say, you know what, I'll do this myself. It's become a little bit easier.
So let me restate that because I have a piece of tape here that says, please repeat questions into the microphone. So I'll summarize it. I think I got it. So essentially what you're asking is what are the challenges that exist today that keep the independent producers of content, be it that they have at their disposal tools that make the production of that on par with the traditional studios, but that they don't have access to the archaic systems you were referring to. What challenges do they have that they have to overcome to get their visibility around their content and into this multi-platform environment?
They're no longer necessarily reliant upon
Major studios anymore.
to
Right.
distribute and produce their product.
Got it. Okay.
I guess that was to me. I don't know.
Not calling names or anything.
Yeah. So, you know, there's in some ways where I sit in the industry is pretty clear. I'm an aggregator. So I'm not particularly interested in one show because I've got 300 channels times 24 hours, you know, plus all the VOD. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of programs. So my, you know, I need to sleep, et cetera. I've only got so many people on my team. So choosing individual programs is not the game I'm in. But I'm certainly watching very carefully things like YouTube and how it's evolving. So yeah, it's very easy to post something on YouTube, but the challenge is how many people are seeing it and how are you breaking through that huge amount of individual programs that are trying to get attention. And so that's where their place in the industry is critical, where a channel is got professionals choosing which shows work for their concept and which shows are sellable in an ad, you know, kind of construct. So there's value to the way the system, you know, the system evolved the way it did because of value. Not in no way denigrates the things that pop up. You know, the fact that Disney just acquired the Maker Studio is because there's enough creative talent in that kind of unit that Disney saw that as a valuable asset to buy. But it's been around for a while and individuals contributing, et cetera. So there's still the challenge of getting an audience for an individual programmer. So you still have to figure out how to get that audience and which direction you're going to go with it. So the kind of open internet, YouTube, user-generated content makes it seem like there's no barrier, but on the other hand, there's a lot of noise in there, a lot of cat videos, a lot of cute kids and tripping over balls and stuff like that. So what, how are you going to get through?
From a content aggregator's point of view, there is limited resources on the operator side. On some platforms like VOD, like YouTube, you don't worry about, running out of space uploading videos, but there is a limited space there. What we do as an aggregator, though, we have a service for independent films, where we will process and put out independent films day and date with theatrical release. So, even though you do need to be as part of that group, that independent, indie film group, we do have a service that does highlight some of those things and not wait for that licensing window, but we'll go day and date with the theatrical release.
Which we carry.
Yes.
But then I've got a challenge of the screen and how many titles and posters. And we have one of the fancier, we have the fanciest, but I still have to, you're competing against the latest Batman and Spider-Man, et cetera. So if I highlight on the entry screen one independent film every day or week, that's a lot. So you still kind of have to fight for your place.
Yep.
And I would submit that it's I think certainly from where I sit, on the network side of the business, and I would imagine, and I believe that this would apply to an independent creator of content as well, that it's a great time to be in the content creation business, right? Like there are more platforms, more places to sell your content than there ever have been before. You've got a lot of companies investing, and some of them have very deep pockets, right? Investing in original programming, in ways, in all sorts of original programming, right? Not just sort of big budget, scripted entertainment or films, but a lot of different stuff. You've got companies like Yahoo and AOL and MSN investing in original content. So and a lot of different form factors of it. So I think it's there are challenges with sort of the uncertainty of, all right, as a creator, do you go this route with a studio, or how do I get an audience, like Trisha was saying, for my content? But fundamentally, there's certainly far more choices than there were before, which I think we've seen lead to great creativity and better quality content at the end of the day, sort of being produced on many of these different platforms.
I mean, you can go to Kickstarter nowadays and raise money to make a film.
Yeah.
That in itself is visibility.
Yeah. Good. Well, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm not sure we have time for a long question. If there's a quick one, we can throw it up here.
Sure. One more.
Yeah, let's do it.
Question probably for Trisha. Is the scope of the digital rights that you're buying now from the networks, is it becoming more standardized across all of the sources? By that I mean, are you getting into situations where you can distribute on Wi-Fi and not 3G and all that sort of stuff, or is that mass kind of going away?
Yeah, absolutely. When each time we, delve into a new area, there's, we have to convince whoever it is, these two or others, that this isn't new, it's just a new platform. And we've also engaged in a couple of different things that are now closed down. So we've all learned from that. So VCast video being one of them on Verizon Wireless. So, and part of that is there were very strict limits from some of the content providers about, oh, it's not Wi-Fi, it's cellular only, blah, blah, blah. So the reality of how some of those businesses have gone, which, I'm a sailor, and so one of the things that I've realized in sailing is I learn much more from my mistakes than my successes, because I think, oh, wow, I could die if I do that again. So the value of having gone through VCast video is huge, because now we all know, okay, I'll live with your rules. I'll put it in front of the programmer. That's not the only thing that made that, we've learned a lot of lessons there, but that kind of thing, that particular thing of the data versus Wi-Fi was a big lesson in that outing, a valuable one.
Perfect ending. All right, that concludes the session. Thanks for coming.
Good job.